for generations.
Dates in the Bible don't quite match the marriage certificate. Uh-oh.
And welcome to Extreme Genes, America's family history show on extremegenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. And this segment of the show is brought to you by rootsmagic.com. And I'm very excited about our guest today on the show for two segments. His name is Michael Henderson. He is of Creole and African-American extraction. And for 30 years, he's been researching his ancestors and has actually found 6 documented revolutionary soldiers, and he's made some history himself. You're going to want to hear his story. It's written up in a great book. That's coming up a little bit later on in the show. And just a reminder, by the way, if you want to keep track of the show, catch some of our older episodes, you can do it not only through our podcasts at extremegenes.com, but also through our newsletter, The Weekly Genie. It's absolutely free. We'd be thrilled to have you sign up for it at extremegenes.com. But right now, let's, I want to say I want to go to Boston, but I know he's not there. It's David Allen Lambert, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. You are on the road today.
I am. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky at the National Society of the Sons of the American Revolution.
Now, you've recently joined the SAR and become something of an officer, right?
I am now the curator for the state of Massachusetts for the SAR, correct.
Boy, they put you right to work, didn't they? By the way, we got to work on how you say Louisville.
Louisville.
Yeah, they don't say Louisville there. No, it's Louisville. Almost like you have a mouthful of something.
Well, nobody's thrown anything at me yet. So is it true that you've been burning the midnight oil looking up relatives again, Fish?
You've seen some of my late emails and tweets, right?
I have.
It's just been amazing. I found this page from a religious record dating back to 1807 in Eastchester, New York. And it showed a whole bunch of relatives on there and many others all clumped together, which helped prove some of the things that I've been trying to put together about one side of the family or another. But here's the weird thing about it, David. About 1/3 of the people on this sheet have a cross next to them, okay?
Oh.
And it's turned out that the people with the cross are all related, and not just to the one family name line that I've been looking at, but to the other side of the family as well. It's almost like they left breadcrumbs for me to work on, and I got 2 other people around the country who are working with me on this, and we're all blown away because we're starting to break down some walls as a result of this one document, so it's very cool.
There's more than one genealogist losing sleep over this problem, apparently.
Yeah, I was the last one down last night. Hit it at about 1:30 in the morning. I'm paying for it today. All right, let's find out what's going on with the Family Histoire news today. Where do you want to start?
Well, I'm going to start in St. Louis, Missouri, where Charlesetta Taylor, an 81-year-old, was given a reprieve. She gets to have her home, which was now moved for her.
What? They moved the house for her?
They did 7/10 of a mile to make room for a billion-dollar government complex, and she fought it, and they paid for the move, and they moved all the electrical and everything, and there her house now sits. This 2-story home made out of brick was up and lifted and moved. So who says you can't take it with you to your new place?
I guess she just changed addresses, basically, right? Same house, different locale.
Exactly. And it fared pretty well for a 122-year-old brick home.
Incredible.
Well, you think at 99 you wouldn't have to worry about grandma and grandpa getting in trouble? Well, in the Netherlands, a lady by the name of Annie has something off of her bucket list. She got arrested.
What?
Well, according to local police, she wanted to experience a police cell from within. An officer shares photos of the arrest on Facebook. Annie looked like she was having a great time, even while handcuffed.
Wow. Why would she want that on her bucket list? Maybe she's done everything else in her life, right?
That's true. I don't think that needs to be on my bucket list. I don't know about you, Fish.
No.
In Alta, California, a story that began back in 1782 when Spanish soldiers and their families traveled out there, there has been a reoccurrence. This is a reoccurrence of a family getting married in the same parish 200-odd years later. Congratulations to Jacqueline Bernard and Josh Briner of Santa Barbara, who had gotten engaged, and then they decided to change the location of the wedding and decided decided to pick El Presidio Real Chapel.
Okay.
Well, here's the really interesting thing on this. After they booked the Presidio, Josh, who is an 8th-generation Santa Barbara resident, learned that his own ancestor, Callisto and Feliz, first got married in that chapel.
Really?
And they were actually the first couple to be married there. And this is over 200 years ago.
Yeah, I think the number is actually 230, and they use the same altar, which is incredible.
It really is. So, people often have to go back to where their ancestors were married. Well, this couple got married where their ancestor was married.
Wow.
It's amazing sometimes when you walk into, may it be a church, a cemetery, you have that feeling like you've been there before. And to find out that you are getting married at the same place where your ancestor did, but not plan it that way,
yeah.
It's really strange.
That is really a bizarre thing.
Of course, the story is on extremegenes.com. It almost makes me hope that my daughters will want to get married at one of the churches. Maybe not in England. That will cost me too much. Well, down the street where we went to back in the 50s.
There you go. Much cheaper.
In the Blogger Spotlight this week, we are featuring Randy Seaver of California in his blog, geneamusings.com. Randy has long been a fixture in the genealogy community and is always entertained with his blog. It's both entertaining and informative. On this week's blog, he talks about the most popular databases on Ancestry.com, so you can go through the top 10 list from public family trees that has over 2 billion records to the 1940 census to U.S. city directories to the 1930 census. Well, I'll let you go to Genie Musings and see the rest of that top 10. So check out a new blog each week, and we'll have a new spotlight for you next week. By the way, I just want to say, if you haven't taken advantage of American Ancestors' offer for Extreme Genes listeners, Genies, if you use the code EXTREME, you'll save $20, and you can become a member of the oldest genealogical society in America, AmericanAncestors.org, brought to you by the New England Historic Genealogical Society in Boston, where I've called home for 24 years.
Very nice, David. All right, well, listen, have a safe trip, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Very good.
And coming up next, we're going to talk to Michael Henderson. He's an African-American, Creole, European. He's got an incredible story to tell you. It's coming up next in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Genies, 10 years ago, in April of 2012, when the government released the 1940 census, it took Ancestry several months to complete and review an accurate index. Fast forward to today. Using proprietary handwriting reading software, it took Ancestry only 9 days to get the job done with the 1950 census. Now, they held back results for a time for actual humans to review what the software had created. And after just a few weeks, it became obvious the software was near perfect, and the computer-generated index to 153,000 names has been released. What does this mean in your journey to research your family? It means you can search the entire database quickly and easily for your family members. Never has a U.S. Census Index been created as quickly as this. Go to Ancestry.com today, click on the 1950 census on the homepage, and see what you can discover. Hey, Genies, as we've dug into our family history explorations over the past year, our community at Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies has taken off. This is where you can meet like-minded genealogists who can help you break through those brick walls and find a whole city behind it, occupied by ancestors whose names you don't even know yet. This is where you can learn from your fellow genies and ask questions, because many in our community have already been into some of the records you're looking for. Genealogy and Breakthrough Strategies is free. What a great place for brainstorming and getting to know other people who totally get your passion for family history research. If you're looking to take the next step in sharpening your skills, here's a great chance to learn from others and give back in areas you've already become expert in. So join us. That page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. It's a long name, but we cover a lot of territory. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies.
Unknown parentage, lineage society membership, building your family tree, leaving a legacy. Regardless of your reasons for hiring a professional researcher, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you discover your family's past. Their genealogists are highly rated in their field with specialties in DNA analysis, historical context, and forensic genealogy. For nearly 20 years, Legacy Tree Genealogists have created thousands of professionally bound and digital reports for families like yours around the world. So whether you've hit a brick wall in your research or are just getting started, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you tell your story and preserve it for generations to come. To receive a free estimate for professional research, visit legacytree.com or call 1-800-818-1476. That's 1-800-818-1476. We'd be happy to talk to you. Legacy Tree Genealogists.
And we are back. It's America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth. This segment of our show is brought to you by LegacyTree.com. Of course, in recent weeks, we've been telling you a lot about our adventures at Roots Tech, the world's largest family history conference in Salt Lake City, Utah, in early February. And one of the interesting people I met there was this guy, Michael Henderson from Atlanta, Georgia. He's on the line with me right now. Hi, Michael. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Well, hi, Scott. It's good to be here, and thanks for having me today.
Michael has an incredible story where he basically started like most of us do, with a little bit of interest, the stories from his relatives that kind of tweaked that spark early on in his life. And what an adventure you've had. Let's just start at the beginning, Michael. How did you get going? What were the stories you were hearing that made you say, I got to find out more about this?
Well, actually, it started as me as being a young child, having a conversation with my mom. I can remember being about 9 years old, and we were just basically talking about the various family members. And she mentioned her mother's maiden name and her father's surname, but the mother's maiden name sparked an interest, and that part of the curiosity that kind of started everything. The maiden name was Mathieu. It's a French surname, and I wanted to know more about it, and that's where I got started, right there with being curious.
As an African-American with a French name, that's kind of a different path, isn't it?
Well, that right there was part of the whole exploration of, Mom, where did this name come from, and how did the family get the surname? And because it was on her mother's side of the family, I've been successful with being able to document and trace my ancestry back to a group of individuals known as Creoles here in Louisiana. And so I asked her, I said, where did the name come from? Where was it derived? And I asked her how to spell it, because it didn't sound like the normal English version of Matthew. And we got into this discussion, and she mentioned to me that she realized that the family was French Creole, and they had this French ancestry or ancestral connection. But that was about all she knew. She didn't know the particulars. But what she told me was that when she was only 6 years old, her mother passed away. And so my mom, as a 6-year-old child, and I, as a 9-year-old child, I realized then there was a special moment for me. So that was the genesis of it starting. But all throughout my life, I've been one of the curious ones in the family.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, by the way, here in Louisiana, because you're visiting New Orleans, you're visiting your hometown right now with the family, and you're lucky because you got both of your folks still with you. So I would imagine you're still collecting stories, yes?
Last night we had a family gathering here, and some of the cousins came over that I hadn't seen in many, many years. I'm the oldest of 8, but I have some other cousins that came over to see my wife and I, and we just got to talking, and some of the stories started coming out. And I told my wife, I said, pay close attention, because this is where you get the cream, the gems, and you're going to find out some additional information I haven't even told you yet. So just keep your ears open and be the fly on the wall.
You were talking in your book. You've written a fabulous book, by the way, incredibly well written for this type of book, I will say right now, because a lot of people, if they're genealogists, they can get into the book. But I think this book is so accessible to anybody who might have an interest in this, and just the history and the sleuthing side of it, because you really took this thing back, interviewing cousins you didn't even know about. Talk about this unique cousin that your mother introduced you to and what she shared with you.
As I mentioned earlier, my mom and I had a discussion about the family and the origin of the family. And when she told me that when she lost her mother at 6 years old, she being 6, she said, well, I have some other cousins and some family members I'm going to take you over and we'll have a conversation with that person. And it just so happened it was the family historian, all unbeknownst to me at the time. And so she invited us over to her home, and we sat down for a few minutes, and I shared as much as I knew about the family because I started gathering, collecting. This is much later in life. I told her all the things that I was interested in learning. This is what I had uncovered. And was there anything else she could provide me? She gave me 3 items. She gave me a wire diagram of some family members, and it was basically a bunch of names generations back. She gave me a picture of my mother's parents, which was my mother's grandparents.
Wow.
And she gave me a piece of oral history. Now, all of this came about through this discussion, interviewing this person over a period of a few minutes as we were communicating. But the piece of information was a bit of oral history that I guess she held close to her heart because, again, it's the kind of stuff that you don't just talk about openly to anyone. And it was that part of the family secret I learned later on. But they wouldn't allow us to use Daddy's last name, and this was the progenitor of this particular family line that I stumbled upon. And she said, she told me, she said, Cher, you're about to jump into some areas that the family don't talk about very much, so be careful as you're asking various people, bits and pieces of information that you come across. But I see the process in which you're going about, you're really serious about this. But so take this along, and maybe this can help you further your research. Basically, that's what kind of propelled me to dig even deeper, to put the names together, to find the documentation, to clarify some of the understanding or misunderstanding that came about. And the result turned out my discovery of a 4th-generation grandparents, male and female, who lived during the French and Spanish colonial periods in Louisiana's history.
So you have quite a mix then between the Creoles, the Europeans that came in, and the black slaves and free blacks as well, right? Talk a little about that, because I know you have a very unique story concerning one of your 18th century ancestors.
Well, the story itself involves a 4th-generation grandmother named Agnes. She was born during the French period of Louisiana's history from 1699 to 1783. She was born about 1758 in St. Charles Parish, about 30 miles north of the city of New Orleans. And her relationship with a Frenchman who was born in Marseille, France, wound up in Spanish Louisiana around between 1765 and 1770. They formed this relationship in the city of New Orleans, and he actually assisted her with gaining her freedom. She was actually manumitted December 16, 1779, after having gone through a year-long court battle with her former owner. And it turned out that the Spanish colonial governor, Bernardo Galvez, had to sign her manumission document because they weren't able to come to an agreement, but Spain allowed enslaved individuals to self-purchase themselves. And Agnes came up with her money, the resources, based on the amount that was said. She came up with that value, and she was able to get her freedom with the signature of Bernardo Galvez and our French consort.
But to me, the amazing thing was you actually got to find and hold that document.
Yes, indeed. It was a manumission document discovered at the New Orleans Notarial Archives here in the city of New Orleans. The actual document is still in the possession of the Notarial Archive. So I was able to get a Xerox copy of it, and it's about an 8-page document because there was some process. There's a process that they had to go through, a tribunal that was set up because her former owner would not allow her to go free. That document itself held in its pages some interesting dynamics of who all was involved and what actually happened in the final analysis. So that was one of 4 documents that actually helped me to really understand the story itself.
Wow, what an incredible journey this has been. How has this affected some of your other cousins, the people that you're getting to know better as you age?
Well, the thing about it, all of them are finding it to be very interested. This particular cousin that became the kind of like the keeper of the records and seals and things like that, she held this information close to her heart because it was a badge of shame. Agnes and Matthew were not able to marry because of the laws of the time, the black codes, Code Noir. They were forbidden to marry. So what Agnes did was she took his first name, Mathieu, and used it as the family surname. That's how the name came into existence as a derived name locally. But the family surname is DeVoe, which was from Marseille, France. And the family didn't know that. All they knew that there was a relationship between this enslaved woman and this white European, and that was it. And that kept on for 5 generations till his 9-year-old kid came along and asked his mother, why is the name spelled Mathieu? Where did the name come from? And again, I was able to uncover the essence of the story itself. But what was most interesting about that entire journey and discovery was what else I found. This guy, Mathieu, who helped her gain her freedom, had a unique part to play in that whole story. I also found out that he was part of the local militia in the city of New Orleans, serving under the command of the Spanish colonial governor, Bernardo Galvez, who happened to turn out to be a patriot of the American Revolution. So now I needed to figure out a way to tell the story, how I was going to educate the reading audience that was going to read my story, to give an appreciation about Louisiana history, American history, and how my two ancestors came together.
And yet when I read your book, I hear how much you hated history when you were a kid, just as I did. It was the family history that got me interested in history in general.
That's what I'm trying to express now as I talk to various groups. If you want to get a kid really interested in American history, make them connect American history to their own history. Let them learn about their own individual history and work back to the period of time, if they're fortunate enough to do, so that that history comes alive to them. I was like all the other kids. Basically, I studied the history, made the grade, but I didn't really care for, memorizing a lot of facts and figures. It wasn't until I got older where I started to really appreciate the value of knowing one's history. And that's what I try to capture in my book, Got Proof, my genealogical journey through the use of documentation and how that all came about.
And as a naval officer, of course, this had to really kind of fill you with a little bit of pride to find that you had ancestors who were part of the revolution, yes?
That was also genesis that as I got older, I wanted to really trace back my military lineage in terms of the males in my family who served in the military. My father served in Korea. His father served in World War I. I came across several ancestors that fought during the Civil War. One I came across that actually served in the Confederacy. Then there were several that served at the Battle of New Orleans under General Jackson, one of the 1st Battalion Freemen of Color.
We're going to find out more about this and talk about your revolutionary ancestors and where that led you, coming up when we return in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. And we are back. It's America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. Fisher here, your Radio Root Sleuth. This segment is brought to you by MyHeritage.com. And on the phone with me right now from his hometown in New Orleans, Louisiana, it's Michael Henderson. He's the author of the book, Got Proof: My Genealogical Journey Through the Use of Documentation. This is an incredible story for somebody who is African American, and as we all know, Mike, that is just a very difficult path for a lot of researchers, especially when you get back beyond 1870 and the manumission of the slaves at that time. But you have gotten back well into the 18th century through your Creole lines and have found how many revolutionary ancestors?
Well, Scott, I've identified 10 Revolutionary War ancestors that served under the Spanish colonial governor, Bernardo Galvez, and have actually documented through the Lineage Society, the National Society of Sons of the American Revolution, 6. I'm working on 4 others as I gather the documentation and finding the necessary records to compile that information.
And so how's that been working out for you? You mentioned the SAR. Historically, you kind of made your own mark in Georgia, which is where you live now, joining the SAR, the first African-American in your chapter, yes? Or in the entire state?
Actually, I'm the first African-American in the state of Georgia and the society in Georgia. It was not by accident. I basically found out when I was getting inducted that I was going to become the first African-American of the Georgia Society, and it was all because I happened to be living in Georgia at the time. My ancestors from Louisiana served in Louisiana, and I was really trying to get into a chapter in Louisiana. But I was advised that locally to join a local chapter where I could participate in the various events that goes on there. So I'm happy to say that happened all of a sudden, and I'm proud to be the first one to become a member.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people would wonder, how were you received in the Deep South, being the first?
It was open arms. I haven't had any problems. Just like everyone that get into an organization like the SAR, it's through documented evidence or documenting your ancestral lineage back to a patriot of the American Revolution. I did just like everyone else. As far as being the first, again, there was a lot of curiosity of how could I have done this? Who was the person? Everybody automatically assumed my ancestor was an African American patriot of the American Revolution. It just so happened that all 6 of my ancestors that have been documented are white Europeans. So that in itself was a challenge of trying to put that story together through documented evidence, which I was successful in being able to do.
That's incredible. Tell us about some of the ancestors.
Well, I have this one ancestor from Marseille, France, who arrived in Louisiana, happened to be a merchant, came to Louisiana during the Spanish period and wound up in the Spanish militia. I've located a French-Canadian ancestor who came down from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, born in Montreal, came down to Louisiana, and I happened to find him in one of the militias out in St. John the Baptist Parish, out about 30 miles north of the city of New Orleans. 2 other ancestors that were locally born in St. Charles Parish, one a father and a son, were both old enough at the time. They are of a German-Swedish extraction. Their father was a German-Swedish officer, and both sons were officers also, and they served in the local St. Charles militia. There is a German ancestor that I came across also that I was able to document through this particular lineage. And so when I found my bloodline connection to these persons and their participation in service under the Spanish colonial governor Bernardo Galvez, I went forth to document that and submitted that to the Sons of the American Revolution as a third-party adjudicator. And everything checked out in terms of my bloodline, and I wanted to get them recognized for their service and participation.
Absolutely. And, you're absolutely right. One of the things that I enjoy about being a member of the Sons of the American Revolution is that you get that third party to validate your research. And I've done that with the Society of Mayflower Descendants as well, because a lot of people can make claims that pass down the family, and then people say, well, they say that we have ancestors who did this or do that. But when they can actually prove that and make that proof stick, then that's a really valuable thing to have as far as passing down your family history with confidence that what you're giving them is absolutely true.
That is so correct. And one of the things for me as an African American, being able to connect my ancestor to the American Revolution through the service of ancestors who served outside the 13 colonies, it gives me a chance as a living memorial to those ancestors to be able to speak on their behalf in terms of acknowledging the fact that they were there, they participated, and this was the service and contributions to this country that our family provided to make this America the way it is today. It's almost multiracial, multicultural, and it has given me a sense of pride and understanding that how valuable that is from an inspiration standpoint.
And then in time, you became the leader of your group there in Georgia, yes?
Yes, the local chapter that I joined, the Button Gwinnett chapter of the Georgia Society Sons of the American Revolution, a couple years later, I assumed the role of the president of that particular chapter, another first, because, again, being the first African-American in the state, I became the first African-American male to assume a position as a chapter president. So, again, each one of the things that I do within the organization, it becomes a first because, again, I'm the only one.
Absolutely. And you mentioned before the break that you had an ancestor that fought with Andrew Jackson in New Orleans. Of course, the Battle of New Orleans was a hallmark in the War of 1812. And in fact, I had an ancestor that was born on the 18th anniversary of the Battle of New Orleans. So they named him Andrew Jackson Fisher.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah, it was fun to figure that out when I looked at the dates and went, oh, I get it. Okay. So tell us about that ancestor and what role he played in that battle.
His name was Louis Innocent Mathieu, and he was the son of Matthew DeVoe. And as you mentioned, the Battle of New Orleans and the War of 1812 was pretty much the second revolution that the United States participated against Great Britain, and it culminated here in New Orleans. Matter of fact, in 2015, we celebrated the bicentennial of that battle, and I learned of Lewis's participation as being part of the 1st Battalion of Freemen of Color, company of about 250 to almost 260 men, one of two companies. The 1st and 2nd Battalion of Freemen of Color was formed in the city of New Orleans itself. And these men of color, all free, participated under the command of General Jackson at the Battle of New Orleans, right there at Chalmette, right down the road, about 8 miles from where I live. That was an interesting discovery. So I had to go ahead and document him, and that, too, led to my being eligible for another lineage society, the General Society of the War of 1812, which I submitted my documentation on that on behalf of him also.
Well, the book is called Got Proof, My Genealogical Journey Through the Use of Documentation. He's Michael Henderson. Where can they get the book, Mike?
Well, the book is sold on Amazon.com. It can also be purchased on my website at michaelnhenderson.com.
I mean, it's a great work, very inspiring, too. Amazing things that you've accomplished over how many years now?
It's been over about 30 years of research, and I'm still in the part of researching, and research never ends. But what this book has allowed me to do is actually get to the end point where I was able to give the journey, the discovery, and the results achieved. So the journey continues on, but this was the result of one particular path that I went down.
This is a great exclamation point on Black History Month, Michael. Thanks so much for your time. Congratulations on the book. I mean, it really is an incredibly well-written book and very inspiring, tough to put down, and a good read, too. It's not really overly long. I think people will really enjoy it.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you also for having me on your show today.
Hey, it's been great. Thanks so much. And coming up next, we're going to talk to our preservation authority, Tom Perry from TMCplace.com, answering your questions about preservation. That's in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show.
Genies, if you haven't done so yet, you've got to check out Ancestry.com's new storytelling creation center, Ancestry Stories. Their story builder allows you to create a story with 6 different slide types, including a title page, a photo display page, including stock pictures they provide, and documents. And you can write a summary. And with those photos, you can add motion, panning left to right or right to left. For now, these stories can only be created on your iPhone, but Android is still to come and can be saved to your ancestors' pages on your trees. You can then access via phone, and in time, it'll appear on your desktop. You can also share it with family members and friends, whether or not they subscribe to Ancestry.com. For the younger generation that wants stories in a quick and easy-to-consume form, you can't beat this. I've already shared a story with my family, and the reactions are remarkable. Try out these incredible new tools and share your new story creations on social media using hashtag #MyAncestryStory. Hey Genies, it's Fisher here, and my shiny new ExtremeGenes.com website has been described as having that new car smell. I love hearing that. Having been with you for over 8 years now, it felt like time to help out listeners and followers who need to know the basics of genealogical research, as well as how to understand your DNA test results, and to be able to put them to work for you, breaking down brick walls, identifying birth parents, locating new cousins who may have photos and information that can't be found anywhere else, and verifying your paper trails. Yes, DNA can do all that, and I can show you how. Check out the all-new ExtremeGenes.com website and download the free Genealogy Strategy Roadmap and the free DNA Starter Guide. Then, if you like what you see, you can take those next steps to sign up for the video courses that you can watch at your leisure. I'll take you through all the basics, step by step. Find out more now at ExtremeGenes.com. Genies, 10 years ago, in April of 2012, when the government released the 1940 census, it took Ancestry several months to complete and review an accurate index. Fast forward to today. Using proprietary handwriting reading software, it took Ancestry only 9 days to get the job done with the 1950 census. Now, they held back results for a time for actual humans to review what the software had created. And after just a few weeks, it became obvious the software was near perfect, and the computer-generated index to 153,000 names has been released. What does this mean in your journey to research your family? It means you can search the entire database quickly and easily for your family members. Never has a U.S. Census Index been created as quickly as this. Go to Ancestry.com today, click on the 1950 census on the homepage, and see what you can discover.
And welcome back to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, with Tom Perry from TMCPlace.com, the Preservation Authority. And this segment is brought to you by FamilySearch.org. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Super.
And we've got a great email question here from Agarecio. I don't know how to say that correctly, but I'm taking a shot at it. So hopefully it works. And he says, Tom, I listen to Extreme Genes all the time. I think your show is the best. I have pictures that are stuck together. Ooh, I hate when that happens. He says, one set was left in a glove compartment. The others, I'm not sure what happened. Any advice on how I could separate them, or is this a lost cause? Oh, that is such a painful thing to hear.
Oh, it is. There are no lost causes. Everything, can have something done. It just depends what's the best way to do it. But yes, these photos can be saved. You can send them to us or anybody that's a reputable restorer. And what they can do is they can make the glossy fronts just like they were brand new again, if that's how the finish was. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's ways to do it. A lot of people still do stuff by hand. We do it. I know another place in Utah that does it. There's several throughout the country that can do it. But just make sure when you're doing it and you're interviewing people, like we tell you, if you don't want to send the stuff to us, interview the people and ask them the right kind of questions. Like if this is their first rodeo, go to a different rodeo,
Exactly. Now, what happens when a pile of pictures is put in a glove compartment? What causes them to all stick together like that?
Well, there's a lot of things. Heat can actually break down the emulsion that's on the photo and make them stick together. A lot of times in a car, there's going to be moisture. You could even have a leaky window, and there's going to be a little bit of water leaks in there.
Does humidity affect it too?
Oh, absolutely. Water, humidity, all those things are the worst because what it does is it makes a photo soft again like it was when it was originally developed. And then what they do when they dry out together. We've had people send us in photos that were glued to a glass frame. Same thing, humidity got into there. The photo got soft, which was okay, but then when it dried, it became glued to the glass, or in this case, glued to each other.
Okay, so what does he do?
Just looking at the stack that you sent us, I'm guessing you should be paying somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 to $100. It's kind of hard to tell without actually seeing them, but basically what we would have to do, or any reputable place would want to delaminate them without destroying the emulsion. So usually it's a water process that's involved in doing that. And then once we get them separated, then we have to re-dry them properly, because if we just leave them on a rack to dry, they're going to curl and look all kinds of awful. Then if you try to straighten them out to scan them, then they're going to crack. So what we have is we have this great big dryer that's actually chrome. It's polished chrome, and so we put them emulsion side down on those. Then there's a canvas that goes over the top of them that holds them really, really tight, and then it dries them slowly. So what happens is the chrome gives them that shiny finish again, just like they do it at a big place. Because a lot of people think, they go to a place and watch them do their 1 hour photos, and they see these photos coming out dry. They have no idea what's going on in the inside, but it's a wet process. The paper itself is hit with a light, to make it into a positive, and then it goes through a wash bath, all these different kinds of chemicals, and then when it comes out the end, in those big machines, it goes through a polished chrome roller that makes it smooth and gives it some heat to kind of dry them out, and then they come out pretty much flat. But when we do them, they're really, really flat. And what I'd suggest, whether you send them to us or somebody else, make sure that once they're done fixing them, you want to have them scan them at the same time, just in case something between that time to when you would go and scan them yourself, something doesn't happen. And most places aren't going to charge you that much to scan, but even if you have a good scanner, I'd let them do it, get it all done at one place, just to make sure nothing else happens.
Well, how big a pile is it, by the way? I haven't seen the photo.
The photo, I mean, it looked like it was a couple inches thick. It was there had to have been 50, possibly 100 photos in there.
Ouch, painful. All right, thanks so much for the email. And, of course, you can always ask Tom at tmcplace.com. All right, what do we have next, Tom?
You know what? Since we're on photos, let's talk a little bit more about photos for the people that want to DIY it, that were really into doing their own thing. We'll talk a little bit about that.
All right, coming up in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. And we are back. It's our final segment of Extreme Genes for this week, America's Family History Show at extremegenes.com. Fisher here, your radio root sleuth. And Tom Perry is with us also from tmcplace.com. He's the Preservation Authority. Tom, last segment, we were talking about this great question about what happens when all these pictures wind up being stuck together. You can't pull them apart without destroying them. You gave some good advice about how to find somebody to handle that, a professional. But what if you wanted to do it yourself?
Okay, first, if you want to do it yourself, because you can't afford to have us delaminate them for you or somebody else, and I recommend you do not try this unless you have a lot of patience and you're really handy with crafts. So what you can do, you can soak them in water for just long enough to allow them to start to separate. Don't do it and then go cook. You can actually have the emulsion dissolve as well. So you want to really keep an eye on them, keep kind of touch them, see how they're coming apart, but don't force them apart or you're going to be in the same problem. You're going to actually rip the emulsion off. So you want to be really, really careful. The biggest problem with the DIY project is if you don't have a professional chrome dryer, all your photos are not going to be shiny anymore, and you might not care about that because you've got to air dry them, and there's not that chrome cylinder that's going to sit on top of them that's going to give them that glossy finish. So if you have something good like some good clean canvas like you use in crafts to put underneath them, you want to do that. Don't put anything on top of them because, again, the emulsion can get stuck to the canvas or whatever it is. You're actually in a worse situation. So just do them from the bottom. If you want to, you can put quarters on each corner to kind of help put a little bit of weight on them. But anything they touch, there's a chance they can glue to it. So if you get some quarters or something like that, that will help hold the corners down. But don't think, oh, well, if I put some butter on them, then they won't stick or non-cookie. Don't do that because that'll just make it worse.
Has somebody done that? Come on.
I guarantee. Some of the things that we see in and some of the letters we get, I'm just thinking, really?
Yeah.
We're not all professionals. So, if you have questions, don't ever assume anything. I tell my 14-year-old this all the time. If you think something needs to be fixed, don't just try fixing it yourself. Talk to a professional and have them walk you through it. It may be something really easy.
We've got another email here. This one is from Vera. She said, I found some old slides that I'd like to save and store properly. How do I do that until I'm ready to scan them?
That's an excellent question. That's really, really good. In fact, at Roots Tech several weeks ago, we had people come up and ask us very similar questions. What you always want to do, your friend, is cool, dark, and dry. That's the best thing to do. Keep stuff in a cool, dry, dark place. If you have a damp basement, you don't want to use a damp basement. Don't put them in your attic because it goes hot and cold.
So this depends really almost on where you live, right?
Exactly. If you're in extreme cold places or extreme hot places, you need to put them in a climate-controlled place. And as we said years ago, don't put them on a shelf in your closet if you have a heating duct going either underneath the shelf, along the shelf, or above the shelf, because that'll do the same thing. So what you want to do is you want to get some cheesecloth from a good craft store and get some uncooked long-grained rice. Emphasize non-cooked long-grained rice.
Right.
So what you'll do is you'll put this in the little pouch that you've got out of the cheesecloth and then tie it with string or rope. Do not use a rubber band. Do not use tape. Don't use anything like that because they'll come apart. Then the rice will get mixed up. The reason for this is going to absorb your moisture out of the Ziploc bag you have and make them a lot better. Or if you have those things left over from stereos that says do not eat this,
right.
The silica things, they're the same thing. But before you use them, pop them into a toaster oven for about 15, 20 minutes to absorb any water out. Wait for them to totally dry out and cool down, and then put them in there. Either one will work great.
Wow. And that'll keep them dry, and then you can store them until you're ready to scan it.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks so much, Tom. And of course, if you have a question for Tom, you can always email us at asktom@tmcplace.com. Talk to you next week.
My pleasure.
And that is a wrap for this week's show. And this segment has been brought to you by rootsmagic.com. Thanks so much to Michael Henderson for coming on and sharing his incredible journey through the Creoles of Louisiana back to 6 documented Revolutionary soldiers. Amazing story. If you missed any of it, catch the podcast. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. It's free. It's the Weekly Genie. Sign up at extremegenes.com. Talk to you again next week. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.